Hello and welcome. So, if I want to tell you some numbers, let me tell you. This last week there were 400 universities at Goa, 200 of them from around the world. Then close to 800 delegates were here at Goa from 31 countries. And they all spoke at the QS India Summit. And there were also topics like the role of universities and youth, which we are also going to discuss today, and India at 2047, which is also what the Prime Minister has stated in his vision, that what India would be in 2047. And of course, in any country, the role of youth and how they get educated is very, very important. Who was here in Goa? So, among the guests were Ben Sauter, he is Senior Vice President from QS London, United Kingdom. We had Professor Raj Kumar, who's Vice Chancellor of Jindal Global University, which is in Sonepat in Haryana. He presided as the summit chair. And later on the show, we will also be joined by Dr. Ashwin Fernandes. He's chair for QS India and Vice President Strategic and International Engagement for QS London, UK. But for now, I would like to welcome Ben and Professor Rajkumar. Good to see both of you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And I've been hearing about this summit for the past few years, and I also know that the Chief Minister of Goa comes, and he seems to be very happy about it, that in a state that's known for its tourism and few education institutes, you are managing to get 300 and 400 universities, 200 from across the world there. So, Professor Rajkumar, I want to ask you, as you were the summit chair, what is your opening comment of the scale and the grandeur of this event and the motive?
Well, it's been an absolutely phenomenal QS India Summit 2026. It has been the vision of QS. Right from its CEO Jessica, who led the effort, and of course at the ground level Dr. Ashwin Fernandes, who is the QS India chair, and Ben and many others contributed. I have been privileged to be the session and the conference chair for it. It has caught the imagination of not only the Indian higher education establishment but also the world. I mean, not only it brought in more than 200 universities from around the world, but it also brought in senior leaders. Just imagine a country like Canada, for example. There were 22, university vice chancellors and presidents from Canadian universities. There were significant presence of vice chancellors and presidents of British universities and Australian universities. They were also from New Zealand and almost other parts of the world. There were also ambassadors and high commissioners of various countries, including Canada, United Kingdom, and many other countries, including Austria. So in some ways, the best part of this summit was it had multiple stakeholders. It had educationists and essentially leaders of higher education institutions. It had diplomats, people from representing the diplomatic community. It had politicians, including leaders such as the Honorable Chief Minister of Goa. It also had corporations, companies, business enterprises who work in the field of tech and AI and the use of technology in education as a very important part of it. And lastly, it also had students. So it is probably the most impressive and the largest national and international conglomeration of educationists and educators that happened in India.
Thank you, Professor Raj, for sharing that with us. Ben, since 150 years ago, even in the year 1875, Indians have been going to the United Kingdom to get educated. Be it Oxford, Cambridge, Harrow, a lot of Indians obviously to get educated in the English language. That time, of course, there was British rule in India, and somehow even after independence, the tradition continued. And we've seen generations of students in many families, and now even higher middle class Indians who go. But obviously, the number of Indian students are so much that no particular country can suffice the demand that Indian students have in terms of simply the number of seats they want. Yep. And so in the recent past, we saw announcement by a few international universities who wish to come to India to set up campuses. There have now been globally acclaimed campuses like the one set up by Jindal Global University, which sort of address this demand. I want to know from you, from a global perspective, where is India positioned today in the global education ecosystem? What things must India change to emerge as an academic superpower by 2047? Whether it's more expenditure and budgetary allocation to education, or anything that you want to share with us, if you could maybe comment on this.
I mean, great question, and I mean, we're really poised at a crossroads. I think one of the reasons why the QS India Summit has become so popular amongst leaders is because there's recognition of the importance of India, not just today, but to the future workforce of many countries around the world, not just here in India. 25% of the world's primary age school children are here in India. And the world is waking up to the fact that when they've got diminishing and aging populations here in India, there is a pool of talent that is going to be needed around the world. So that's driving that interest from the outside in. At the same time, there's been this maturing from an international perspective. There have always been strong, highly respected institutions here in India for the domestic market with extremely high academic standards in international terms. If you don't get into an IIT, you can maybe get into Yale or Oxford or Cambridge because they have always been that sort of selective. That's actually been an obstacle to internationalization in those institutions because it's so hard for an international student to get in and cope academically with the rivals they're going to meet in those classes. But what we've seen in the last few years, I think we're comfortably into India's adolescence, if you like, as an international player. And through these years, beginning to swing the needle to India as a destination. It's small, it's slow, it's short at the moment. People are prepared to come here for a week or for 3 weeks or for 3 months. Not necessarily yet for a year or 3 years. That will take more time. And one of the things that's really been at the forefront of that building momentum has been the drive of, in particular, leading private institutions to offer a different kind of experience here in India that more closely resembles that which you might find at an international university, both in terms of its pedagogy and its experience from a facilities perspective. Obviously, our friends at JGU are working very hard and very successfully as one example of that trend. But what it's doing is it's shining an example for other institutions to follow, and more universities are attempting to emulate some of those lessons and really capitalize on the strengths of India from both a talent and a place perspective.
Point well taken, Ben. I'll go to Professor Rajkumar. See, I read a lot that India produces 2 million graduates a year, which means there is a lot of demand for education courses. These 2 million students would be wanting to take various courses. And so India has thousands of colleges to address that demand. But most of them have poor quality infrastructure. Many are housed in single buildings, and there are so many issues. So I saw Jindal Global University came as a breath of fresh air in terms of the kind of infrastructure that I think exposed many Indians to who had not seen it before. What they saw at your university is what they never saw in any other academic campus. But obviously you yourself alone can't handle the demand that India generates. How do we sort of get to sustained global excellence? I mean, if you don't speak like the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor of Jindal Global University, and if you speak like the CEO who runs education in India, for example, you are a CEO appointed by the government to run education in India. I wouldn't say a minister because I think CEOs get a lot of things done. Well, what should we do?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tarun. I think you mentioned about the scale and scope of it. The reality is India today has 46 million students of the Indian higher education system. And that number still only is able to cater to what is known as 28% of the gross enrollment ratio is what India has, which means despite a large number of people, which is around 46 million people who are part of the higher education system, you still have a significant available demand and even people who aspire to come into higher education. Of course, we know that the demographic situation is such that with a 1.5 billion people, 1 billion of them are less than 35 years of age. So there is no doubt about the fact that in terms of sheer demand and scale, India has to cater to the aspirations of a large number of youth. And it is also the case that if we don't provide education for these young people and obviously empower them to also get some jobs and meaningful opportunities, we do run the risk of a large number of uneducated young people, which can potentially create serious concerns and consequences for the well-being of any society. So this ought to be an absolute imperative. So what can we do? Well, there are I have 5 ideas that I want to quickly share with you. One, I think it's absolutely important that we need to focus on expansion. There is no doubt about the fact that one size fits all model may not work. And so if we have had historically public universities fulfilling a very important demand in the early post-independent India, we need to do more. Even though we have now 1,000 universities and 50,000 plus colleges, we need a lot more institutions. Now, unfortunately, the public spending in higher education has been relatively less. The GDP investment in higher education has been relatively less. And hence, it's important for looking at a large-scale private sector impetus, but also the kind of private sector investment where the quality and excellence are not compromised. And that's why philanthropic models such as the one that Mr. Naveen Jindal has promoted in establishing JGU and many others. I could add some others, including other philanthropists who have come in recent times. The second aspect, which I think is very important, is that sheer quantity is not enough. We need to focus on quality. The reality is, if we end up producing large number of unemployable graduates, that is also not good, and you simply cannot sustain a democracy of the kind that we have without giving emphasis on quality. That includes teaching and educational pedagogy and research and ecosystem that prevails. The third is something that we have done very seriously post National Education Policy after July 2020, when the NEP was released. We gave new impetus to internationalization and global partnerships and collaborations. The idea of collaborating with the world, although it's part of our long-held civilizational heritage. Nalanda and Takshashila and Vallabhi and Vikramshila had students and learners and faculty members from around the world. But somewhere, both pre-independent India, but also post-independent India, we got lost track of that. But now with the National Education Policy and the impetus that no less than the Honorable Prime Minister of India is leading from the front, we have given new impetus to internationalization and international collaborations. The fourth aspect of what we have begun to do more seriously is that we have begun to benchmark our institutions with the best in the world. It is no longer the case that we can simply make judgments and statements about quality without actually looking at measurable outcomes, looking at rankings and assessing institutions and benchmarking them with the best in the world. If you want to compete with the best in the world, you need to benchmark yourself and improve your quality. In fact, China is a good example. Barely 2 decades ago, there was not a single university among the top 100 in the world from China. India still doesn't have, but today there are almost 6 universities from China which are there, and that has been part of all these efforts. And the last bit I think is very important, which is that we need to infuse significant capital and resources in it. One of the advantages we have is we are leaders in frugal innovation. We can do a lot more and lot better with much lesser capital, but it will be a mistake to assume that quality and excellence doesn't come with the price. We need to create a funding mechanism. We need to promote higher levels of philanthropy, including innovative ways of tax restructuring and even persuading benefactors to contribute to higher education in a significant manner, because we know that the state may not have enough resources. If we do all these things consistently for nearly, say, 1 more decade, I think we will be better prepared when we end up in a situation where, because we will take another 20 years or so to get to the stage where we maintain. So the next 2027 to 2047, which is almost a 20-year effort, is going to be on this particular aspect. If we do all of this, I genuinely feel that we will be closer to becoming what the Honorable Prime Minister calls the Viksit Bharat. I, for one, believe we simply cannot be a developed nation unless we have world-class universities which are contributing to the educational imagination of the youth.
Point very well taken. Thanks for explaining this beautifully. I'll go to Ben. Ben, I want to know that Indian universities, how could they sort of forge global partnerships, rankings, and also collaborations with global universities to sort of level up? Because, one way is to develop it yourself. The second is learn from the best. People who have done it for the past 300-400 years would be doing something right. It's better to learn from them and, maybe grow faster. How could they do that? How could many Indian universities do that?
Well, the first thing to say about Indian universities is that in recent times they've been doing that a lot better than they were doing before. So at the very least, keep doing what they're already doing. We've seen the number of Indian universities represented in the World University Rankings go up by 397% in the last 10 years, and in our Asia rankings by 1,000% in the last 10 years. That doesn't happen because Indian institutions are engaging less with the outside world. Quite the contrary. They engage with these exercises because it's a way of drawing attention to them specifically with the intention to partner internationally. Now, what we're seeing on the partnership side as well is that there is growth, but there's also huge amounts of potential for further development. There has been reasonable progress in research collaborations, but for many Indian universities, a focus on producing material, which is easier and quicker to do just in your own little box, rather than building internationally collaborative, high-quality material that's likely to make a bigger impact on your institution's metrics, but also ultimately on society around the university, which I must emphasize is the principal priority. There are various measures of quality. Most of them respond much more effectively to actual improvements in quality and impact than they do to attempting to make the numbers work to your advantage. So I think the best thing to do is to engage in summits like the one that we've just held, but also get outside India, particularly perhaps to the places that not as many other Indian institutions are going to. We can help Indian institutions in the Americas, in Europe, in the rest of Asia Pacific with our range of global summits. There are also other organizations that are keen to support institutions in other places. We've also recently supported delegations from India to the UK, from India to the US, and that opportunity to, outside the conference circuit, get inside an international university, feel and see it for yourself, and forge those face-to-face relationships which can lead to fruitful endeavors is irreplaceable and is never going to be adequately duplicated through digital means.
Point very well taken. One last question before I take a break. Professor Raj, I want to know from you two things. One, when I go to, say, your campus in Sonepat, you see a campus that could be straight out of some place in California or could some other place in the world, and it's then situated in Sonepat in Haryana. But you step out the campus and real India hits. Why do I ask you is that a student would be happy to come because I have seen many world-class Indian well-known college brands with no running water most of the times, and not campuses which are not, the upkeep is not that great. Education may be good, but basic infrastructure is lacking. It all sort of comes down to a certain public hygiene and a public order that is needed, and that also impacts our rankings because many students from higher middle class campuses wouldn't want to study in such a campus. Some basic issues, safety, the basic issues like good infrastructure, amenities, standard classrooms, equipment, all of this, and if he is well-traveled, the student is well-traveled, he takes it for granted, which in India is not commonly available. Of course, in few institutions it is. Do you think a national infrastructure program to upgrade our universities is needed where certain infrastructural metrics should be mandatory for every university to get us A in the rankings? How do we invite delegations from any country around the world, if our basic infrastructure is not, our hostels are not up to the mark, our classrooms are not up to the mark, how do we even compete with people without basic good infrastructure? Here I'm not talking of the top 20 universities of India, I'm talking, because you said 46 million students, I'm talking of so many universities. What would be your opinion on this?
So, Tarun, this is part of a larger challenge we face in the world, which is we are obviously living in an not so equitable world. Historically, for example, the reality is that educational institutions were built either as islands of excellence or even islands of infrastructure, meaning that our universities have not been historically grown along the larger urban planning and the kind of urban infrastructure that is built around it. So if you look at, for example, Stanford University, the entire city of Palo Alto, grew around tech and innovation and entrepreneurship, and both the institution and the city contributed to each other's collaboration and benefits and all of that. We have very few such examples, and mostly there is a dichotomy and somewhat of a indifference and almost kind of ships passing in the night type of situation where, the university and the education institutions do their own thing and the city and the township and others grow around it. Although there's enormous economic development and activity happening because of the university. I mean, we are a very small university, but just consider these numbers. We have 10,000 students who live on campus. We have more than 4,000 faculty members and staff. And there are almost 25,000 families in and around our campus who directly are dependent upon the economic activity of any kind that the university contributes to. We have 6 million square feet of built up space, and we are barely 16 years old. If you look at these numbers, the economic impact of universities, the social dimensions of education is profound. And hence, today, when we look at the future, we need to look at a more collective, participative, inclusive, and a more engaged collaboration with the city, the township, and the town planning aspect. Here I'm talking about not only the infrastructure impact of it, but also research-based collaborations. Many of the problems that are faced by local community or society, there are scholars and researchers who end up working in the field. There are students who may be part of that community activity. That partnership requires a total reimagination of what the universities are and what townships and cities are. I think it's only fair to say that both the universities and the governments or the private actors have been largely functioning in an isolated and indifferent manner, and that is already beginning to change. Even at a small level, I can see we've been there for now 16 years. If I look at the first 7-8 years of how we were positioned there, somewhat isolated, nobody really bothered about our existence. And now for the last 8 years, we have extensive partnership locally. We work very closely with the district administration. We just published the first district level human development report called the Sonipat Human Development Report. No less than the Honorable Chief Minister had released it in Chandigarh. And so the point I'm trying to say is this partnership is critical. If you look at many parts of the world, the integration of urbanism and urban planning and urban development has a direct correlation to university spaces and the activity that university does. I think that's one area we need to focus on. Of course, it is so obvious that employment generation through the activity that the university does and partnership with local communities and local companies and local corporations also has a huge impact. And this is an area where we need to do more. In many ways, we need to break the existing barriers that has far too long resulted in a more isolationist approach towards education.
Two takeaways from what you said. When I was at your campus last time and I was discussing with someone, to a boy who was in Sonepat village, JGU on the other side of wall would be like an English word which we call utopia. Something that he would say this is another world and it's just a wall that separates me and utopia. Secondly, you spoke about capacity building of the district administration where you could contribute positively, because we see that we have centers of excellence in India in the private sector, few in the public also, but many great things have come out of the private sector in India. And I may not be wrong when I say this, that with 10,000 students and 25,000 in future, you're running a virtual town in the state. A town which has all the fully functional amenities, which right outside the wall wouldn't be there in those terms. If you're working with the district administration, then you are having a greater impact than education itself. Education is just one goal, but these are bigger goals than education. And this is an unintended impact. It happens because simply there are so many educated people around, they want to do something better. Absolutely. Everybody from town planners to architects to educated professors, they want to improve the area that they are part of.
And including students who want to contribute to the community engagement.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I make one clarification from my visit to your campus? Because I think this is an important one. But as I recall, in your design, there is no wall.
Yeah, inside, that's right. You're right.
In fact, you are, you clearly have bold plans for the future city of Sonipat, yes. But it's not just about what happens on campus, it's also about what happens around it, and that's part of the vision, right?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we established India's first Constitution Museum, because we invite students, including school and college students from across the National Capital Region, but definitely from Sonipat, to visit our campus and discover the evolution of constitutional ideas.
Point very well taken. So you heard Ben and Professor C. Rajkumar, and the other side of the break, we'll get to hear Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, who's chair of QS India. See you right back. So now we are joined by Dr. Ashwin Fernandez. He's Chair QS India and Vice President of Strategic and International Engagement with QS London, United Kingdom. Good to see you, Ashwin. And just before the break, we had the opportunity to chat with Professor Rajkumar, who was your summit chair, and also Ben, who's a Senior Vice President of QS. I just want to know that where's the India story in education headed, in your view, because you have such extensive relations with universities in India and all over the world. And obviously, because of our population, what's the India opportunity?
A great question, and thank you for having me on your show, Tarun. I think the India story in the last few years has been emerging across, not just in India, but outside India. We've seen how India has received the spotlight. We've seen under the national education policy as one of the major drivers for how focus has shifted from just having educational institutions in the country to having quality educational institutions. And with the rise of private institutions in India in the last 2 decades, now we are seeing international branch campuses coming to India. If India needs to meet its goal of a 50% gross enrollment ratio, it definitely needs support from many more academic institutions, and international players will play a vital role in this. Not just that, but we have 600 million workforce which will be at the risk of losing jobs in the next 10 to 15 years. Now, that's an enormous number we have from our data, and that means that for these people, because of AI, digital skills, green skills coming into play, we need to reskill and upskill this workforce as well. So there is a huge challenge out there, and in our educational institution have a huge opportunity as well to work in India. So the India story is there are young Indians. At the moment, 65% of our Indian population is young, between the age of 18 to 34 years, and that is where the opportunity lies, is the young Indians. And with the access to internet data, the young Indians are highly ambitious. So we are living in a very great moment of time, and opportunity is immense.
In fact, you've brought up two very interesting things. A, reskilling and education for people who may lose their jobs in future, and you talked of 600 million. To put it in perspective for our Indian viewers, it's 60 crore people. Up to 60 crore people are at risk of losing jobs, according to your research or what you read. And these people can continue to work if they again go back to university, reskill in what is wanted. For example, I heard Yuval Noah Harari, he said many times plumbers are higher paid than other university graduates because they do a job which has a market demand. I want to ask you, with the advent of AI and the risk to so many jobs, are universities ready and equipped to educate students or prospective students who are even adults in their 30s and 40s in disciplines that the future of the world wants, which is people who lose jobs, then get trained in a year or two, and then again come back to the job market? Are those courses here with us today, or those have yet to be introduced? Because the impact of the job loss has been seen in a few companies. We saw job losses in some IT companies and all, but as you say, in the next few years, it's going to be immense.
Yeah. So there is, of course, change happening in curriculum. We see institutions benchmarking themselves, what's happening globally. QS has launched the QS Future Skills Index, which looks at countries and how countries are transforming. And India ranks second in the world after US for the future of work. That means we do have companies that want to hire for the skills of the future. And in other areas like academic readiness and economic prosperity, India ranks slightly below. So we seem to be getting there. There is, of course, the opportunity is there for getting those programs in, and that's where international universities coming to India, we've seen them in Goa. They are talking to Indian institutions. We see Indian institutions talking to foreign institutions. Dual degrees, twinning programs, skilling is all happening, but the scale has to improve.
Are there courses that we have never seen are going to be introduced in the market in the next few years? I'll give you an example. The Skill Development Ministry, a bureaucrat recently said that India was requesting Chile to send sophisticated operators for dumpers. These are large dumpers and excavators which are used in the mining work, and they were paid up to 2 lakh rupees a month because they couldn't find anyone in India who could operate those dumpers. They say these are not your trucks that anyone can drive with a little training. These are sophisticated dumpers that require intense training because you're in a mine and you're in a difficult environment. That itself is a course, if you look at it from someone's perspective, given the amount of mining that happens in India. Do you think there are areas where no courses exist and we will see courses in future?
It's an evolving market. We've seen several skills which yet, like for example, drone skills. We've seen how the government is having those various programs to the National Skills Development Corporation being introduced. We're looking at skills beyond just nursing into several other care for the older people. So this could be one of them, and I haven't probably heard about how the heavy machinery skills are required, but they could be skills, and it's evolving. What's going to drive forward is definitely AI is going to be leading forward, and AI use in specific areas is going to be leading forward. Also, the green and digital skills are something which we think is going to change in the future. So it is an evolving market. QS has a lot of data on the skills required. We have data across millions of jobs at the moment, which we are looking at, which currently the workplace needs. And we will have to wait and watch how the scene changes in the future.
So there is a lot of talk about how India needs to change focus from students being job seekers to students being self-employed professionals. Second, the future of factory jobs is not that certain. I say this with a sense of responsibility because it is not uncommon for us to read news that a factory which had 6,000 employees assembling mobile phones was replaced by another factory that does the same job with 400 people. So 6,000 people sort of lose their jobs, and 400 people who can use AI that is used in that factory are employed again. Those 6,000 people replaced by just 400. So you have a deficit clearly of 5,600 people. These people are now out without a job where they were assembling phones. Which world we are heading in, and are we ready for it? Are the universities ready for it?
This seems to be a worry for almost everybody at the moment, and we've seen the government has been looking at various mechanisms to be able to introduce change in the curriculum. We've seen the National Education Policy talking of interdisciplinary education. So definitely, I think with the kind of focus which the government has had, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Skills, in 2014 we had less than 15,000 startups. Now we have over 2 lakh startups in India. So it is changing, but India is a huge country. There are, of course, with the opportunities, there are challenges as well. And I think while we are moving forward, the soft skills is where we need to train our entrepreneurs in to be able to tackle the challenges of the future.
One thing that I want to ask you as one of the last questions is that, of course, there is this AI challenge. Of course, a lot of universities will also play time to catch up. I ask you this because I have seen in the past 2.5 decades, MBA colleges mushroomed in India. They were charging very high fees, and Indian students were very happy to pay that fees. Later, when they realized that the job offers that they got after getting educated were so low that it didn't justify the investment in education, and so seats started going vacant, and we had so many colleges which shut down in India. Then there was this whole mushrooming of engineering colleges in India, starting with the early 90s when people used to pay heavy capitation fees to get educated. Obviously, there were jobs then. In the past 15 years, we saw many students who got educated in engineering did not get jobs commensurate with the investment in the education. So many engineering colleges shut down. Why I'm asking you this is that you sort of associated with some of the best universities globally. What was lacking in Indian education institutes that led to their shutdown, because it's all a demand-supply gap where a father of a child sees that if I invest a particular amount, my son gets a particular job with this kind of money, it simply doesn't make sense to invest in education. That is why I'm asking you, is India or has India not invested at scale in quality education? It's one thing to set up a building and a college, it's another to invest in quality education. And where can organizations like you help in this?
So our education system has gone through transformation after independence. And we've seen from institutions which were set up purely to have rote learning as one of the process, to now wanting them to be thinkers, to be able to integrate skills into it. So the NEP has just started 2 years now. Since 2020, it was introduced. By the time it's been implemented across the length and breadth of India, we've seen that the change is happening. Skills across the sector is changing how universities are seeing the degrees, because the expectation today as well for parents and the kids is, once I do the degree, what is the job am I going to get, and what is the salary am I going to get? That mindset change also has to happen, because we've seen several institutions, and you've had earlier on the show the Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University, where they're bringing global education into India, into the Indian shores. But the packages of salaries are not the talk of the program. It is the skills what are being imparted. So if institutions can start integrating skills, preparing the graduates for the future, giving them the skills, the soft skills required to have in terms of the agility to move ahead in life, the skills for making them strong for the future, and not having reliance on the job market, but being job creators, initiative, creative thinking, and so on. That will change the mindset in the future, because when more people get into creating jobs, we will see that vicious circle we've had from the past will go.
Interesting that you say this, and I've always seen how income categories in India see university education. People from the lower strata see it as a ticket to upward mobility, where they realize I get into this college and my family gets a ticket, an upward mobility in the socio-economic strata. For many others, it's upskilling, because it doesn't matter what I earn after education, because there is enough in the family to take care. So while in halls like these we can make statements, but where the heart of India, which is an average person earning say 20 or 30 or 40,000 per month, for him investing in education is a much bigger call. And that's where India is different from other economies where upwardly mobile people live with a certain basic education or a certain basic income. Do you think these unprofitable areas, because universities need money to be profitable, money to invest in infrastructure, do you think that's India's challenge?
We have educational institutions in India run by the government, and when we look at access to higher education and we compare now with foreign universities coming to India, charging the kind of fees they are, we've seen there is a divide there, right? But there is, of course, right now I'm told that Delhi University and other institutions across the state-run institutions provide degrees at 1/10 of the fee what it would, or the private sector. So there is the education is still seen as a ticket out of where the circumstances are of a person into upward mobility. And for us, we'll have to start thinking, how do we increase access to this beyond what we have right now? And education should be available to our Indian people, to our young people, and along with just providing them education, the curriculum is going to change. Along with the curriculum changes and skills are embedded, we're going to prepare our youth who are going to create jobs also. And there's also a craze in India for entrance exams, like you have your UPSC exam, you have your other exams, and that is also seen as a way out for people out of where they are to where they want to go and achieve in life. And we've seen the kind of seats available and access to those. So that is a different challenge altogether, but we have to create higher education as a skills-focused pathway for people to move to the next strata in their life.
Thank you for explaining this. You got 200 universities, global universities to India. Maybe we'll see many of them investing in India and local campuses, which will sort of take the skills of the student community here up to a certain level. And I think it would be good to see you again next year when you do the QS Summit at Goa. And I think many more new topics and much more to discuss. But thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to also thank the viewers for tuning into this show, where we are 3 panelists today discussing education, everything from infrastructure to special needs of India, and of course how much India needs to invest in education as a part of its GDP. All that was discussed. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.